Good afternoon, and thank you for having me to the second annual Silicon Valley Comic Con. Do we, do we have any geeks in the house? They're all down here, none of them are up there? Okay. I guess I could be considered a geek, maybe a space geek, and golly, I'm shooting for the moon again, but this time it's to lead us to Mars. But we've got to do it together this time, in cooperation with other nations. The world does a better job of big endeavors when we work together. Timing is very important, always been a very significant part of my life, because I am proud to have served my country, and I will continue to do so. I've served the U.S. Air Force and the Apollo program. The Apollo program could never have happened without the cooperation and efforts of many people working together toward a common shared goal. And when people work together, sometimes you can accomplish the impossible. Consider this. We do have slides, maybe? Yeah, all right. I can see it here, but all right. So you can see it too. All right, now they told me about it. Mankind has always dreamed for centuries of reaching space, other planets, even the stars. But it wasn't until the 20th century that man took to the air. In 1903, the Wright brothers took their first flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. My mother was born that same year, and I guess you could say that pioneering was my destiny. You see, her maiden name was Marion Moon. And I took my first flight at age 2 with my father, Edwin Eugene Aldrin. And it was in a Lockheed single-engine Lockheed Vega, and it was painted to look like an eagle. How about that? The symbol of our country and the name of our spacecraft landed on the moon. Now, surrounded by this influence of aviation, I entered the Air Force after graduating from the military academy at West Point. I was in the Korean War as a jet fighter pilot. I flew 66 combat missions. Following the Korean War, I was stationed in Germany in the late 50s. The Cold War was accelerating. The tensions were high. In October 1957, the Soviet Union pulled off a very sudden and unexpected technological feat. They launched beep, 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 Sputnik into orbit. And a year later, America formed the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. With the goal of reaching space. So the space age was formed, and the space race was about to begin. In 1961, NASA launched America's first Mercury astronaut, Alan Shepard, on a 15-minute suborbital flight that touched the edge of space. Now, the Russians had already achieved an incredible accomplishment by sending the first human into space, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, one full orbit around the Earth. President Kennedy asked NASA what is possible. They told him that it would take 15 years before we could put a man on the moon. I recently learned, however, at 100th anniversary of the MIT Aeroastro Department, that Kennedy visited NASA and asked the engineers to figure out how to get to Mars. So they worked over a weekend and came back with the answer. It was just a little bit too hard. The moon might be a more realistic goal. Now, that probably was the busiest weekend that NASA ever has spent. Can you imagine one weekend to do that? So on May 25th, 1961, 3 weeks after Alan Shepard's flight, President Kennedy boldly challenged America to commit to the goal of landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. We hadn't even put anyone in orbit. The rockets and spacecraft just really didn't exist. And many thought this challenge was going to be impossible. We just didn't seem to have the know-how. But we did have a leader with the vision, the determination, the courage, and the confidence that we could get there. By publicly stating our goal, putting a specific time period on this specific achievement, President Kennedy gave us no way out. Yeah, we didn't have the best plan, but we did develop it a little later. Now, if space was going to be our next frontier, then I wanted to be a part of getting there. So I decided to continue my education and receive my doctorate in astronautics from MIT. Now, heck with a master's degree, just go right for a doctorate. For my thesis, I devised a technique for two spacecraft to join up in orbit called manned orbital rendezvous, sort of patterned after intercepting another airplane in the atmosphere. Little did anyone know, including me, how critical this work would be to our later successfully landing on the moon and coming back, because we had to rendezvous to get back. Now, the first time I applied to be a NASA astronaut, I was turned down because I hadn't gone to test pilot training in my plans. Somehow I just didn't think that that was really necessary. So that was it, but I was determined and I applied again. Now, this time, my fighter experience in combat and NASA's interest in the concept I had for space rendezvous influenced them to accept me in the third group of astronauts. And I became known among my peers, Navy, Marines, and Air Force, as Dr. Rendezvous. Now, it wasn't always a complimentary description. But you know these guys, they try and poke fun at you. Mercury was the first stage of our space program, followed by the Gemini program. And it's correct to call it Gemini or Gemini, but they're both in the dictionary, the one I read anyway. Now, this two-man spacecraft was used to fill the gap as the rockets were being developed for Apollo. Took a while. So Gemini became an integral part of our training, and it helped us learn to do things like spacewalking, long-duration flight, computer entry, and of course, rendezvous. Now, I was an avid scuba diver. I was the first astronaut to train underwater for the simulated weightlessness of space. This is a swimming pool. You can see the bubbles going up. During my first flight as a pilot, really a co-pilot, there's a commander, Jim Lovell, but we don't want to degrade a term by calling somebody a co-pilot. There's a commander and a pilot. I was the pilot of Gemini 12, and I was able to set a record of 5.5 hours spacewalking outside the spacecraft, circling the globe every 90 minutes at the speed of 17,500 miles an hour. What a sight to behold outside the spacecraft. By the way, did you know that this was the first selfie in space? Now, to really be a selfie, the camera has to be attached to a spacecraft in orbit. Now, this is the most expensive selfie stick you could imagine. Now, this was 1966, and look, we've made a lot of progress since then. The timing of the crew rotations was just right for Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and me to be chosen as a crew for the first potential historic mission to land on the moon. And on the 8-day round trip journey, the three of us lived in a space capsule. No, it's a spacecraft. And it was about the size of a standard automobile interior, a Volkswagen, to be precise. We had estimated the chance of successfully landing without having to abort and not make the landing at about 60%. And 6 out of 7 missions is pretty close to that. But also, we really believed that we had about a 95% chance of returning home safely. And combat sometimes is more, sometimes is a little less, and we accept those odds. But they certainly were more than acceptable to us at the time. And those odds were with us, and we successfully landed on the moon. It was. And it truly was one small step for man and a giant leap for mankind. Now, Neil was already on the surface, and he was taking a few photographs of me as I backed down the ladder after partially closing the hatch. I didn't hear too many people laugh when they heard this, being careful not to lock it on my way out. Now, as I stepped on the talcum-like lunar dusk, dust. The first words that came to my mind were magnificent desolation. It was magnificent accomplishment for humans to set foot on another world for the first time. And yet there was the total desolation of what we looked out on. No atmosphere, no air, nothing growing anywhere, just gray. I don't know how many shades of gray, whether it was 50 shades or what it was. But you could see the horizon kind of going away. It was so clear. And there probably wouldn't have been a very successful flat moon society. But it was black sky. Couldn't see the stars because there was too much brightness for our eyes. Now, this photograph that you're looking at now is the one that Neil took of me. It's called the visor photo because you can see a reflection of the Eagle spacecraft and Neil in the visor of my helmet. Now, people have asked me why this iconic photo is so great. I have 3 words: location, location, location. Now, Neil, being the commander, had the camera most of the time. It was my job to sort of set up the experiments, but I did get a chance to take a few photos. And this is my boot print on the moon. It was so distinct what the dust did when we put our foot down. I just felt I had to take a picture. I took a before and after, but it still looked a little lonely. So I did take another picture of a print and then the boot slightly to one side. Now, my son Andy has turned into quite a photographer, underwater on elephants and sharks and alligators. And he says that with all the photographs that he's taken, thousands of pictures as a photographer, but I've only taken a few pictures in my life, and this one turns out to be one of the most iconic photos. Man, once you get it right, why keep pressing on? Back on Earth, everyone felt like they had participated in this incredible journey. The world welcomed us back as heroes from the moon, but we understood that they were not cheering just for 3 guys, but for what we represented. That by the world coming together, we had accomplished the impossible. The true value of Apollo is the amazing story of innovation and teamwork that overcame many obstacles to reach the moon. And I feel very privileged to have played a part in this historical event. So today, at the age of 87, my life is really better than ever, and I feel like things are really coming together. I consider myself a global space statesman, and I've been doing the very best that I can to move things forward. Now, people ask me, why do we need to go to Mars? Why do we even need a space program? Because by venturing into space, we improve life for everyone here on Earth. The scientific achievements that come from space-based research create products and technology that we use in our daily lives. For example, cell phones, TV, GPS, medical advances. Many of these would not have been possible without the investments in the space program. Professor Stephen Hawking recently said, and I quote, "We have made remarkable progress in the last 100 years, but if we want to continue, our future is in space." I couldn't agree more. I won't be around to see much of it, but I want to do everything that I can to lay the groundwork. And this is why I wrote my plan for the future in my book, Mission to Mars, released in 2013. There have been some improvements, refinements since then, but it was published by National Geographic. And now I have a kid's book called Welcome to Mars, published in September 2015. And this kid's book was selected as the best science STEM book by the National Science Teachers Association, 2 years in a row. And I'm very proud of this book. I'm very proud of this because it's important, because these are the ones who will be carrying out the Mars missions. We're not going to get there next week. I think we have things to get done to recover from the not really great situation we're in right now. We can't even put somebody in space up to our $100 billion space station. Now, I pride myself in thinking outside the box, leading by innovation. And in the past year, I've been involved in the creation of virtual reality content so that you can help see what it's like to stand on the surface of Mars, including a project called Destination Mars, produced by NASA, JPL, and Microsoft. And just a few weeks ago, at the South by Southwest conference, we unveiled my Cycling Pathways to Mars virtual reality experience developed by 8i on the Time Life VR application. It's a visualization of my long-term plan of a moon base and a permanent colony at Mars using cycler spacecraft and trajectories. And guess what? You lucky folks can view my VR app right here at Comic-Con. So don't miss it. It's your chance to take a journey to the moon and to Mars with me. Don't forget to get your 8i video with HoloBuzz. That's the name of something. It's my mini me in augmented reality. I've been planning this space transportation system of cycling pathways, Earth orbit, Earth to moon, moon orbit, then Earth to Mars, since 1985. And now, with the help of Purdue University and my Buzz Aldrin Institute at Florida Tech, I have a team that's helping me develop these concepts that I've been working on for 30 years. And I'm certainly an advocate for international cooperation in space. And even though we landed on the moon 50 years ago, I believe we cannot ignore the moon now. And I feel the U.S. should help these other nations reach the moon and build a base to continue research and to discover the ice. The ice from the moon will create lunar fuel to refuel the landers that go up and down right from the beginning. And even though we've learned how to do that in the backyard with segmented time spans of this routine operation, when you explore on Mars, you're looking for something new, and it's not routine. So you can't segment things, but you can something like refueling on the moon, and convince yourself that if things are similar, we can refuel a lander on Mars from the Earth. Working together will make this vision a success. And it all has the goal of a permanent settlement on Mars. That means you land and you stay there. Now, people aren't going to buy that right away. It's going to take some steps of convincing the practicality, the objectives that we're setting out for us, and together how we can achieve that. I can guarantee you, you haven't seen anything yet. Now, I figured I needed all the help I could get. So in March of last year, I visited Stonehenge, and I sent a message out to the cosmos. And I've been getting the answers back piece by piece. Now, aside from my space efforts, I still have an adventuresome spirit. I've been up to the North Pole on a Russian nuclear icebreaker and down almost 4,000 meters, about 2 miles to the ocean floor to see the Titanic and a yellow French submarine. My favorite thing to do on this planet, however, is scuba diving. And here I am on a trip in the Galapagos Islands in 2010. My son Andy took this photo of me hitching a ride on a whale shark. Now, it's not something you kids out there ought to just jump in and do that at home or wherever you find one. So I finally made it to the South Pole last month to cap off my exploration experiences. It was a little tougher than I had expected. I knew it was not sea level. It was 9,000 feet, 6,000 feet of ice, but it was all worth it. And I got the record for the oldest person to reach the South Pole. We do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And I plan to keep pushing boundaries as long as possible. So just, you never know. You never know where I'm going to be in the world. Now, if you're interested in learning more about my vision for Mars, you can go to my website, www.buzzaldrin.com. Humanity needs to explore or expire. We need to go beyond current limits, just like we did in 1969. Apollo was the story of people at their very best. We started with a dream, and we did the impossible. I know, we did it because I'm living proof. The heck with these naysayers. We've taken pictures now of the boot prints from orbit. So we know. Convinced me too. And I believe we can do it again with a lot of help. So let's go do it again, and let's go for it. Thank you very, very much.